History does not remember the man who spoke the loudest. It remembers the man who spoke the least and left others trembling in his silence. Think about it. Every time you revealed too much, every time you defended yourself when you should have stayed quiet, every time you explained your intentions, your dreams, your pain, did it make you stronger, or did it give someone else ammunition to use against you? Niccolo Machiavelli once warned that a man's greatest enemy is often his own tongue. Not the sword, not betrayal, not even his enemies, his mouth. Because the words you let slip out can wound you more deeply than any blade. This video is not about polite advice. It's not about being better with communication. No, this is about power, about survival, about knowing when silence can make you untouchable. Today, we enter Machiavelli's darker world, the world of strategy, betrayal, and hidden intentions. And in that world, there are 9 brutal situations where your own mouth will betray you unless you master silence. But before we begin, let me leave you with this. Your silence is not weakness. Your silence is a weapon. And in the right hands, silence is deadlier than words. So listen closely, because the first situation will hit you harder than you think. Situation 1, when you are insulted. Let's start with the most common battlefield. Insults. You've been there. Someone mocks you. A colleague undermines you. A rival throws words like knives. Try to cut your pride apart. Your natural instinct is to strike back, to defend yourself, to spit venom louder than theirs. But Machiavelli would laugh at you for doing so, because the moment you open your mouth in anger, you've already lost. Why? Because insults are bait, a trap carefully set to measure your weakness. And when you react, when you defend yourself, you confirm the insult's power. You show them exactly where you bleed. The man who insults you isn't always seeking truth. He seeks reaction. He wants to see if he can control you. And if your mouth explodes with rage or justification, you just hand him the control he wanted. Think of the last time someone insulted you. Did you feel your blood rise? Did you rush to reply, to prove them wrong, to make them respect you? That was your weakness screaming louder than your words. And here's the darkest truth. The more you defend yourself, the weaker you appear. Machiavelli, writing in The Prince, advised rulers to never show vulnerability in public disputes. Because once people sense you can be rattled, they will rattle you endlessly. The ruler who stayed silent after an insult appeared untouchable. The one who fought back, he appeared insecure. Do you see the paradox? The man who swallows an insult whole and says nothing is often feared more than the one who shouts in fury. Your silence unsettles the insulter. He wonders, did I miss? Did I hit too hard? Or have I just provoked a storm that will come later when I least expect it? That uncertainty is worth more than 1,000 angry words. So I ask you, if someone mocks you tomorrow, what's more powerful, exploding in rage or letting your silence burn into their conscience until they break under their own words? Let me give you a story. In the 16th century, at the height of Florence's brutal politics, a young noble was mocked publicly by a rival. Instead of defending himself, he said nothing. He sat there, unmoving, while his rival laughed in front of the entire court. Whispers spread, he must be weak, he must be humiliated. But days later, when the rival attempted to secure support for his political campaign, he found doors closed to him. Silent doors. Silent allies who refused to trust him. Why? Because in those days of silence, the young noble had moved in the shadows. He built quiet alliances, made quiet deals, and by the time he spoke, his rival's fate was sealed. The insult? Forgotten. The silence? Legendary. Now ask yourself this. Would you rather win a battle of words in a moment or win the war of power in silence? Psychologically, silence works because it creates a vacuum. Humans are wired to hate silence in conflict. The moment there's no response, the brain panics. Did I go too far? Are they planning revenge? Why aren't they reacting? Your silence becomes louder than words. Think of the last time someone ignored your insult. Didn't it sting more than if they had shouted back? Didn't it feel like you punched a wall, and the wall didn't even move? That's why Machiavelli believes silence in the face of insults is not cowardice. It's a strategy, a deadly one. Imagine this. Tomorrow, someone throws words at you like daggers. Do you give them the satisfaction of watching you bleed? Or do you become the wall, the cold, silent shadow that reflects nothing? Which one do you think Machiavelli would respect? Final note for situation 1. The first situation where your mouth betrays you is when you're insulted, because insults are not attacks on your honor. They are invitations to show your weakness. And if you reply, you accept that invitation. Machiavelli's advice? Reject it. Say nothing. Build power in the silence, because silence unsettles your enemy, and unsettled enemies are easier to crush later. So remember this. When you are insulted, your silence is sharper than your words. But insults are just the beginning. There's another situation where your own mouth betrays you, and this time, it's not about enemies. It's about rivals. And the more you speak in their presence, the more you hand them the blueprint to destroy you. Let's step into situation 2. In the presence of a rival, your mouth is most dangerous when you sit across from a rival, because every word you speak is not just a sound. It is a weapon they can use against you. A rival isn't like a friend. He's not curious about your story. He's dissecting it. He's waiting for you to slip, to reveal something he can exploit. And in those moments, silence is your strongest shield. Machiavelli warned us, never reveal your intentions, because once your rival knows what you're thinking, he knows how to destroy you. Think about it. How many times have you been in a conversation where you walked away realizing you revealed too much? Your fears, your plans, your weaknesses, and didn't feel like giving your rival the blueprint to outplay you? That's because your tongue betrayed you, not your rival's cleverness. Your own inability to remain silent. Why silence in rivalry is deadly. Rivals thrive on information. They don't need to outsmart you. They just need you to outtalk yourself. The more you speak, the more they learn. Your ambitions, your insecurities, your desires, your pressure points. Words are confessions. And in rivalry, confessions are fatal. But silence makes you unreadable. A rival cannot strategize against a shadow. Now imagine this. You're at the table with a rival at work, in business, or even in life. They're probing you with questions. Do you give them answers? Or do you smile in silence and let them fill the void with their own nervous words? Which one puts you in control? Machiavelli admired Cesare Borgia, the ruthless duke who inspired much of the prince. Borgia's power didn't come from endless speeches. It came from silence. He rarely revealed his plans. He let others boast, brag, and expose themselves while he said little. Then, with precise calculation, he struck. When rivals expected long negotiations, Borgia often ended conversations with a stare, a pause, or a single phrase. His silence unnerved them more than his words, because silence forces the other to keep speaking, and the more they spoke, the more they revealed. In Machiavelli's eyes, Borgia's silence was not absence. It was a presence so heavy that others broke themselves trying to fill it. So ask yourself, do you want to be the man who blurts out every thought in the presence of a rival? Or do you want to be the man whose silence forces rivals to tremble, second-guessing every move? Here's where most people fail. They over-explain. They defend their goals with too many words. They justify decisions. They reveal what they fear most, without realizing it. The more you explain, the more cracks you show, and a rival doesn't need much. A single crack is enough to collapse an empire. Think about the last time you felt the need to explain yourself to someone you didn't trust. Why did you do it? Because silence made you uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Silence is not your discomfort. It's your rivals. Every time you talk to fill the silence, you're not controlling the situation. You're surrendering to it. In negotiation psychology, there's a tactic known as a strategic pause. You stop talking after making your point. The silence creates pressure. Humans hate empty space in conversation, so the rival rushes to fill it, often with confessions, mistakes, or desperate offers. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. Silence turns a stage into quicksand. The more your rival speaks, the deeper they sink. And you stand still, watching, silent, unshakable. What's more powerful, being the loudest voice in a room, or being the silent presence that makes everyone else trip over their words. There's an old story of a general who faced a rival commander during a fragile truce. At the negotiating table, the rival mocked him, asked about his strategies, tried to provoke details about his army's strength. The general simply sat there, smiling faintly, never answering. Hours passed. The rival commander grew restless. He began revealing his own worries. Troop shortages, food supply problems, political pressures. When the truce broke, the silent general didn't just know his rival's weaknesses. He knew them in detail, and he crushed them without mercy. Not by clever speeches, not by persuasion, but by silence. The general who spoke less won more. The rival who spoke more lost everything. Which one do you resemble when you're face to face with those who want to see you fall? Machiavelli believed that silence forces others to reveal themselves. A rival can only measure you by what you give them. Give them nothing, and they'll reveal themselves instead. This is why rulers, leaders, and those who hold power often cultivate an aura of mystery. Their silence is not emptiness. It's intimidation. The rival fears the unknown more than he fears what's spoken. Now, picture this. You're sitting across from a rival who keeps pressing you with questions. Would you rather leave that table with his secrets in your pocket or with your own spilled on the floor? The second situation where your mouth betrays you is in the presence of a rival, because rivals are not friends, they are predators. And every word you give them is a weapon in their arsenal. Machiavelli's warning is clear. A rival can't destroy the shadow he can't see. So stay silent. Let them speak. Let them expose themselves. Because the silent rival is the deadliest one. So far, we've seen how silence protects you from insults, and how silence destroys you if you give too much away to a rival. But what happens when the stakes rise higher? What happens when you are in the presence of powerful leaders, those above you, those who hold your fate in their hands? In that situation, your mouth doesn't just betray you. It may end your rise forever. And that is where we go next. Situation 3, among powerful leaders. There is no greater danger to your rise in your own mouth when you stand before someone more powerful than you. The higher the throne, the sharper the ears around it. Every word you speak before a king, a boss, a general, or a master is being dissected, not just by the leader, but by the vultures circling him, waiting for you to slip. Machiavelli warned, princes must learn that men judge more by their eyes than their hands. In other words, power is perception, and your words feed that perception, whether to elevate you or to bury you alive. Have you ever noticed how quickly one wrong word can destroy years of effort? One careless joke, one bold statement, one overeager attempt to impress, and suddenly, you've revealed yourself as reckless, arrogant, or even dangerous in the eyes of power. It only takes one phrase to poison how leaders see you. And once poisoned, their memory does not forgive. Why silence matters in front of leaders. When you're among powerful leaders, silence is not submission, it's strategy. The silent subordinate appears calm, disciplined, trustworthy. The silent apprentice appears attentive, teachable, and dangerous only if provoked. The silent advisor appears wise, measured, and dependable. But the talkative one, he seems careless, impulsive, desperate to be heard. And desperation is weakness, a weakness leaders will exploit or eliminate. Think about it. Who does the king trust more? The man who constantly speaks, constantly flatters, and constantly tries to insert his voice into every conversation? Or the one who listens, watches, and only speaks when silence has given his words weight? The fatal error of overconfidence. Many men ruin themselves by trying to impress leaders with their intelligence. They speak too much, thinking they will earn them respect. But often, it breeds the opposite: suspicion, envy, or irritation. Machiavelli observed this mistake repeatedly in courts and kingdoms. The man who dazzled with words often drew unwanted attention. The prince begins to wonder, is he too clever? Too ambitious? Too dangerous? And just like that, the talker's mouth becomes a noose that hangs him. How many men do you know who destroyed themselves not by failure, but by success that threatened those above them? How many times has a single word made a leader see you not as loyal, but as competition? Historical example. The Fall of Ramiro da Orco. Machiavelli recounts the tale of Ramiro da Orco, one of Cesare Borgia's most feared commanders. Ramiro was ruthless, brutal, and effective. Too effective. He boasted openly of his methods, spoke with authority as if he were the true master of power. His mouth betrayed him, not because he was wrong, but because he was too loud about his victories. Borgia understood the danger. He could not allow a subordinate's shadow to outshine his own. So one morning, the people of Cesena awoke to find Ramiro executed, his body left in the town square as a warning. The lesson? In the presence of power, speak less. The more you shine through words, the quicker the axe falls. Ask yourself, do you really need to show leaders how clever you are? Or is it wiser to let your silence build mystery? So when you do speak, your words weigh 1,000 times more? Modern psychology confirms this Machiavellian truth. People in power trust silence more than chatter. Chatter signals insecurity, a need to prove oneself. Silence signals composure, discipline, self-control. When you speak less around leaders, they project qualities onto you. They assume you are wise, calculating, perhaps even dangerous. When you speak too much, they stop projecting. They start judging. And judgment is rarely in your favor. Which would you rather have? A leader who underestimates you because you spoke too much, or a leader who fears you because you revealed nothing? Another way your mouth betrays you is through flattery. Many try to gain favor by praising leaders endlessly. But too much flattery reeks of manipulation, and powerful men, paranoid by nature, begin to suspect your loyalty. Machiavelli himself wrote that rulers should beware of flatterers, because they poison truth. And just as rulers should avoid being seduced by them, you should avoid being a flatterer. Silence, once again, is safer. A measured compliment means something. A river of flattery means nothing. Think of the last time you complimented someone powerful. Did it strengthen their respect for you, or make you appear desperate for approval? Story example: the court of Louis XIV. At the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, nobles learned quickly that words could destroy them. Louis valued silence. He often stood in silence for long stretches, making others squirm. The nobles who survived his court weren't the talkers. They were the silent observers, the ones who understood when to bow, when to nod, and when to keep their mouths shut. Those who talked too much, they slipped, revealed ambitions, offended others, or appeared disloyal. And Louis never forgot. Machiavelli believed that the wise man in power's presence should act like a shadow, always there, never overwhelming. Speak sparingly. Let silence build the impression that your loyalty is certain, your thoughts are deep, and your ambitions hidden. Because silence does not just protect you, it disarms suspicion. Remember this: leaders rarely kill the silent man, but they never forgive the talker who talks too much. The third situation where your mouth betrays you is among powerful leaders. Because every word you speak is either a weapon against you or a rope tightening around your neck. Machiavelli's warning is brutal but true. Impress leaders with silence, not with speech. For silence makes you untouchable, while speech makes you disposable. So we've seen how silence protects you from insults, from rivals, and even from the suspicion of powerful leaders. But what happens when betrayal creeps closer? When you're in the company of supposed allies who smile in your face while sharpening knives behind your back. That is where silence becomes more than protection. It becomes survival. And that is situation 4. Situation 4. In the company of allies who may betray you, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who declares himself your foe. It's the one who calls himself your friend. Machiavelli knew this truth well. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from those close enough to know your secrets. The ones who laughed with you, drank with you, and swore loyalty. And in their presence, your greatest enemy is your own mouth. Because what you reveal to an ally today can become the dagger they stab into your back tomorrow. Think of it. How many times in your life did betrayal come from someone you trusted? How many times did they use your own words, your own secrets, against you? It wasn't their cleverness that destroyed you. It was your tongue that armed them. Wise silence is survival among friends. With allies, people let down their guard. They speak freely. They confess their fears, ambitions, doubts, even sins. And this is why betrayal cut so deep. You handed them the blade. You told them what you wanted most. You confessed what you feared most. You revealed who you trusted least. And when the tides turned, those words became evidence, fuel, justification for your downfall. Machiavelli would say, trust is necessary, but silence is survival. Ask yourself, what would happen if every secret you told your friend today were shouted tomorrow in the ears of your enemy? Could you survive it? Or would your empire collapse? The illusion of brotherhood. Throughout history, men have mistaken camaraderie for safety. Armies, brotherhoods, even secret societies collapse not because of external attack, but because of internal betrayal. The illusion of friendship makes men speak too freely. They laugh, they drink, they whisper in confidence, forgetting that circumstances change. The ally of today may be the rival of tomorrow. And once the shift happens, your words belong to them, not to you. So when you confide in someone, do you do it because you trust them or because you are desperate for the relief of speaking? And if it's the second, are you willing to pay the price when silence would have saved you? Historical example, Julius Caesar and Brutus. History's most famous betrayal is also the most tragic, Julius Caesar and Brutus. Caesar trusted Brutus, confided in him, even loved him as a son. But Brutus knew Caesar's ambition, his desire for power, his weaknesses. And when the Senate moved against him, Brutus didn't hesitate. He turned Caesar's own words, his ambitions and confessions, into justification for murder. Et tu, Brute? Wasn't just the cry of a dying man. It was a realization that his own mouth had armed his killer. If Caesar, with all his power, could be destroyed by the words he gave to a friend, what makes you believe you are safe when you reveal yourself too easily? The subtlety of betrayal. Betrayal doesn't always come in blood. Sometimes it comes in whispers. The ally who repeats your words in another room. The colleague who shares your plans with the boss. The friend who leaks your fears to the crowd. Each time, it's your mouth that betrays you first. Silence would have made them guess. But your words made it easy. Who in your circle today knows too much? And if tomorrow they were offered power, money, or survival in exchange for your secrets, what would stop them? The psychology of confession. Psychologists know humans crave confession. We want someone to listen, to understand, to share the weight of our secrets. But confession is a trap. Every time you confess, you create a hostage situation. Your words become the hostage, and the listener becomes the keeper. And the day they decide to use it against you, you are powerless. Machiavelli would warn, control the urge to confess. Bear your secrets in silence, because silence cannot be sold. So here's the question. Is your relief from confession worth the price of betrayal? Or would you rather live with the weight of silence than die from the weapon of your own words? Story example, the fall of Alcibiades. In ancient Athens, the general Alcibiades was brilliant but reckless. He trusted too many allies, spoke too freely of his ambitions, and revealed too much of his schemes. When fortunes turned, those allies betrayed him to the Spartans, exposing his words as evidence of treason. His brilliance couldn't save him. His tongue had already destroyed him. Machiavelli taught that allies are not permanent. They are tools of convenience, bound by circumstance, not by eternal loyalty. And because of this, silence in their presence is not cruelty. It is wisdom. Speak only what strengthens you. Speak nothing that can weaken you. The next time you are the trusted ally, ask yourself, if tomorrow they stood against you, would the words you spoke today be your executioner? The fourth situation where your mouth betrays you is in the company of allies who may betray you. Because allies are not always allies. They are potential rivals in disguise. And every secret, every confession, every careless word you give them is a blade you place into their hands. Machiavelli's law is cruel but clear. Trust actions. Question loyalties. And guard your tongue as if your life depends on it. Because it does. Situation 5. In moments of anger and rage. There are few moments more dangerous than when your blood boils, your heart pounds, and your tongue becomes a weapon you cannot control. In rage, men believe they are powerful. In truth, they are weakest. Because anger does not sharpen your mind. it blinds it. And when you open your mouth in rage, you hand your enemies the keys to your destruction. Machiavelli warned that rulers must never act out of passion, but always out of calculation. Anger makes you impulsive. Impulsiveness makes you predictable. And predictability is death in the game of power. Think back to a time when you exploded in anger. Did your words make you stronger? Or did they leave you vulnerable, ashamed, exposed? Did they solve your problem, or give someone ammunition to use against you later? Wise silence destroys anger's power. In anger, silence is not weakness. It is mastery. Silence denies your enemy the satisfaction of seeing your emotions. Silence buys you time to think. Silence makes others wonder how dangerous you truly are beneath that calm surface. When you remain silent in anger, you are not suppressing your fire. You are storing it, weaponizing it, turning it into strategy. Imagine two men insulting each other in public. One screams, shouts, and curses. The other smiles faintly, says nothing, and walks away. Which one do you remember as powerful? Which one lost control? The trap of angry words. Anger makes you confess what you would never reveal otherwise. You shout your deepest insecurities. You confess your fears. You reveal grudges, jealousies, and hidden thoughts. And once those words escape, they can never be taken back. They linger in memory, waiting to be used against you. Machiavelli knew this. A single burst of rage could undo years of careful calculation. Because in anger, you don't just reveal yourself, you betray yourself. Ask yourself, how many enemies know exactly how to hurt you? Because you told them in anger? Historical example, Alexander the Great. The mighty conqueror Alexander the Great destroyed empires, yet even he was not safe from his own tongue and anger. During a drunken rage, Alexander quarreled with his close friend Clytus. Words turned sharp, insults turned brutal, and in his fury Alexander grabbed a spear and killed him. In that moment, Alexander lost more than a friend. He lost trust among his men. His rage revealed his instability, and whispers of doubt followed him ever after. Even the greatest of kings can be destroyed by one uncontrolled moment of fury. If Alexander the Great could lose everything in a single outburst, what makes you believe your anger is harmless? The psychology of rage. Psychologists know that rage hijacks the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part that calculates strategy, shuts down. The amygdala, the primal part of the brain, takes control. This is why in anger you blur out secrets, make threats you cannot fulfill, and destroy alliances you worked years to build. You are not yourself. You are your weakest self. But silence bypasses this. Silence is the pause that allows strategy to return. When you are furious, do you want to be ruled by your primal brain, or do you want to remain the master of yourself? Fear for your silence rather than pity for your outburst. Story example, the silent samurai. There's a tale of a samurai whose enemy insulted him publicly, mocking his honor. The samurai said nothing, only bowed and walked away. The crowd thought him cowardly, until days later, when the enemy disappeared without a trace. The samurai's silence had concealed his intent, turning his revenge into something unseen, unpredictable, and terrifying. Had he shouted in anger, his enemy would have prepared. Instead, silence made him untouchable. Do you see the difference? Anger spoken is a warning. Anger silenced is a trap. Which one do you prefer to be known for? The poison of regret. Words and anger are permanent. Apologies rarely erase them. The betrayal of your own mouth lingers in memory long after the heat has faded. Lovers never forget the cruel words shouted in rage. Allies never forget the threats you made. Enemies never forget the weaknesses you revealed. Machiavelli understood that rulers, once seen as unstable, could never regain full trust. The tongue that slips in anger cannot be repaired. Think of the people you've hurt with words and rage. Do they truly forgive, or do they carry your words like knives, waiting for the right time to use them? Machiavelli's counsel is brutal. Master silence and anger, or be mastered by your tongue. Because silence and rage is not suppression. It is strategy. The man who screams shows his cards. The man who remains silent makes the world guess at the storm he hides within. And nothing is more terrifying than a storm you cannot predict. The fifth situation where your mouth betrays you is in moments of anger and rage. Because in fury, your mouth runs faster than your mind, revealing the very weaknesses you should guard. Silence in these moments is not just control, it is survival. Machiavelli would remind you, a single angry word can undo a lifetime of power, but a single moment of silence can save it. So far, we've seen how silence protects you from insults, rivals, leaders, friends, and even yourself in moments of fury. But there's another trap, one even more subtle. It comes not in anger, but in joy. When victory is yours, when you feel untouchable, when your pride swells and your mouth cannot stop boasting. That is the sixth betrayal, and it is often the deadliest of all. Situation 6. In moments of victory and pride. Victory is intoxicating. When you win, when your enemies fall, when you finally rise above the struggle, something inside you burns with triumph. And in that fire, your tongue loosens. You boast, you reveal, you laugh too loudly, speak too freely, and hand your enemies the map to your empire. Machiavelli would warn, victory is not the end of danger, it is the beginning of it, because nothing blinds a man more than pride, and nothing betrays him faster than his own mouth when he feels untouchable. Think of the last time you won something, big or small. Didn't you want to tell everyone? Didn't your pride push you to speak more than you should? And didn't that pride eventually draw envy, jealousy, or silent resentment from others? The subtle danger of victory. When you speak too much in victory, you reveal the methods you used to win, create envy among allies, signal your weaknesses by showing what you value most. Silence after victory is far more terrifying because it leaves others guessing. How did he win? What is he planning next? Can I trust him? Pride speaks. Power whispers. Ask yourself, do you want to be remembered as the man who shouted his triumph from rooftops, or the man whose silent victories left everyone trembling, unsure of his next move? The trap of boasting. Boasting feels powerful, but it plants seeds of destruction. When you boast, enemies mark you for revenge. When you boast, allies envy you. When you boast, the powerful above you see you as a threat. The victory that should have secured your future instead becomes the rope that strangles you, and all because your mouth could not resist bragging. How many men have destroyed their own victories by celebrating too loudly? And how many enemies have plotted revenge after hearing the careless boasts of the victorious? Historical example, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, the brilliant general, rose through Europe with unmatched genius, but his tongue in victory betrayed him. He boasted endlessly of his destiny, his power, his empire. His pride made him blind to caution. His mouth created fear among kings who once tolerated him. And those kings united, not because Napoleon was undefeatable, but because his arrogance made them believe they had no choice but to destroy him. His victories were many, but his tongue helped summon the coalition that ended him at Waterloo. If Napoleon, with the world at his feet, could be undone by his own prideful mouth, what makes you believe your smaller victories are safe from the same fate? The psychology of pride. Modern psychology calls it the winner's curse. When you win, your brain floods with dopamine. You feel unstoppable, blind to danger, convinced of your superiority. And in that high, you talk too much. You reveal plans, expose weaknesses, and provoke envy. But silence after victory is unnatural. It makes others wonder. It makes them cautious. And caution is exactly what you need from them. Would you rather let your victory make you predictable, or let your silence make you feared? Story example, the gladiator who boasted. In Rome, there was once a gladiator who never lost a fight. After each victory, he boasted in the arena, mocking both defeated foes and powerful patrons. The crowd loved it, until the senators grew jealous. His boasting, once his glory, became his curse. He vanished from the games, eliminated not by a rival's sword, but by the silent envy of those in power. If he had kept his mouth shut, he might have lived forever as a legend. Instead, his pride destroyed him. Do you see it now? Silence after victory is not weakness. It is preservation. The one who boasts in triumph prepares his own funeral. The poison of envy. Boasting in victory does something deadly. It awakens envy. Allies who once supported you now feel small beside you. Enemies who feared you now burn for revenge. Even the powerful above you begin to see you as a threat. And all it took was a few careless words. Machiavelli knew envy was the most corrosive force in politics. Silence keeps envy at bay. Words feed it until it consumes you. Think of your last achievement. Did you keep it quiet, or did you announce it, only to notice the subtle shift in others' eyes? Which one protected you more? Machiavelli's law is simple. Victory is safest when it is silent. Let others speak of your triumph. Let rumors spread. Let whispers grow. But never give your enemies or allies proof from your own mouth. Because once you speak, you lose control of the narrative. But when you remain silent, you become a mystery, and mystery is power. The sixth situation where your mouth betrays you is in moments of victory and pride. Because nothing seduces the tongue more than triumph. But nothing endangers you more than careless celebration. Machiavelli's warning echoes. Silence after victory is not emptiness, it is dominance. The louder you boast, the sooner you fall. We've now seen how silence shields you from insults, rivals, leaders, false allies, rage, and even the poison of your own pride. But there is another trap, one even more subtle. It comes not when you are angry or victorious, but when you are simply too comfortable. When your guard is down, when you believe you are safe, when your casual words sow the seeds of your destruction. That is where we go next. Situation 7. In times of comfort and carelessness. Power is rarely lost in storms. It is usually lost in sunshine. When men are at war, they guard their tongues. They know every word could be used against them. But in times of comfort, when the wine is sweet, when the friends are laughing, when the night feels safe, that is when the mouth slips. Machiavelli would warn, the deadliest betrayals don't happen in battle. They happen in moments of comfort, because comfort makes you weak. It makes you speak too much, reveal too much, and trust too much. Think about your own life. Haven't you noticed that secrets rarely slip in times of tension? They slip during laughter, during rest, during careless conversation. Comfort is the enemy of control. The drunken tongue, alcohol, warmth, or simple relaxation. These are the poisons that loosen tongues. A careless joke exposes your opinion. A passing comment reveals your plan. A laugh gives away what you truly feel. And once spoken, words can never be recalled. The Roman proverb was true. In wine there is truth. And truth, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. How many kings, politicians, or powerful men have destroyed themselves because of one drunken sentence? And how many ordinary men have lost jobs, friends, or trust for the same reason? The trap of safe company. Comfort doesn't come only from wine. It comes from false safety. When you feel among friends, when you believe you are trusted, you drop your guard. And in those careless words, your enemies find their ammunition. Machiavelli would remind you, no circle is truly safe. Even allies may one day turn rival. And the words you gave them in comfort become weapons sharpened against you. Remember, the friend of today may be the enemy of tomorrow. And tomorrow, he will recall every careless word you spoke when you believed him loyal. Historical example, the fall of Alcibiades. Consider Alcibiades, the brilliant Athenian general. Charming, gifted, and ambitious. He won trust in every circle. But in moment of comfort, among friends and allies, his tongue betrayed him. He mocked the leaders of Athens in private, believing his companions safe. But those words were repeated. His enemies gathered them, sharpened them, and used them to bring him down. It wasn't in war that he fell. It was in comfort, through careless speech. If a man like Alcibiades, favored by Athens and admired by Sparta, could be destroyed by words spoken in comfort, what makes you think your private words are safe? The smile of the listener. Another danger of comfort. You believe people listen as friends, but some listen as hunters. The smile you see hides calculation. The nod you trust conceals memory. The laughter you share becomes evidence in their mind. They will not use your words today. They will wait. They will collect. And when the time is right, your own comfort will become the rope they tighten around your neck. How many times have you spoken freely to someone who smiled and nodded, only to later discover they remembered every word, while you had long forgotten them. Story example, The Merchant and the Inn. A traveling merchant in medieval Europe stopped at an inn. After a day of profit, he drank, laughed, and bragged to strangers about his wealth. The next morning, he was found dead, his coin chest gone. His killers? The same men who clapped him on the back and drank with him hours earlier. His comfort killed him. His mouth betrayed him. You may not face daggers in the night, but every careless word you speak in comfort arms someone who could wound you tomorrow. The psychology of carelessness. Modern psychology calls this lowered inhibition. When you feel safe, your brain relaxes its guard. You speak without filtering. You expose the very truths you normally protect. But Machiavelli understood centuries ago what science names today. Comfort is the mask that removes discipline.
The wise man guards his tongue not only in fear, but also in ease. Because comfort is temporary, but words are permanent. Ask yourself, do you think you're most dangerous when angry or most vulnerable when comfortable? Which has betrayed you more? Machiavelli would advise, keep a lock on your mouth in times of ease. Let others boast. Let others laugh too freely. Let others reveal their true thoughts under wine or friendship. Meanwhile, you observe. You listen. You collect their words as weapons. And when the day of conflict comes, you will have an arsenal they built for you, while your silence leaves them nothing. The seventh situation where your mouth betrays you is in times of comfort and carelessness. Because in comfort, vigilance dies. And when vigilance dies, the tongue betrays the mind. Machiavelli whispers across centuries, comfort is a trap. Carelessness is poison. Guard your silence, even when the world feels safe. So far, we have seen how silence protects you in insults, rage, rivalry, victory, and even comfort. But there is a darker moment still, when silence doesn't just protect you, but actively terrifies others. The moment when your refusal to speak becomes more powerful than any word you could utter. That is where we go next. Situation 8. When silence becomes intimidation. Most men fear words, but the wise man knows there is something far more terrifying than words: silence. Because silence forces the other person to fill in the void with their own fears, insecurities, and doubts. Your silence becomes a mirror, and what they see inside it is often darker than anything you could have said aloud. Machiavelli would warn, when you speak in these moments, you disarm yourself. But when you remain silent, you become a storm no one dares to predict. Think about it. How many times have you feared what someone didn't say more than what they did? The unspoken threat is always heavier than the spoken one. When you refuse to answer, 3 things happen instantly in the other person's mind. They project their worst fears into your silence. They lose control of the conversation. They begin to reveal themselves in an attempt to break your stillness. This is why interrogators dread a silent prisoner more than a screaming one. Silence turns the power dynamic upside down. Which is more frightening? The man who yells threats, or the man who just stares at you without a word? The power of unanswered questions. When someone demands an answer, silence becomes unbearable. They ask again. They repeat themselves. They grow frustrated. And the longer you withhold words, the more control you steal. Your silence forces them to react while you remain unshaken. Machiavelli knew, the man who speaks is naked. The man who is silent is armored. Have you ever noticed that the quieter you become in an argument, the more the other person reveals? They scramble to fill the silence, exposing their weakness. Historical example, Stalin's deadly silence. Joseph Stalin mastered the weapon of silence. During meetings, he would often sit in complete stillness, saying nothing. His silence made his generals and ministers unravel. They feared not his words, but his lack of them. Every pause felt like a verdict. Every quiet glance felt like a death sentence. Men betrayed themselves simply to escape the weight of his silence. It wasn't what Stalin said that controlled them. It was what he refused to say. Would you rather face a man who curses you, or a man who sits in silence, letting you wonder what punishment he's already chosen? The psychology of intimidating silence. Psychologists call it the silent treatment. But in its darker form, it is not about immaturity. It is about domination. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds fear. The human mind cannot tolerate a void. It rushes to fill it with its worst assumptions. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology gave it a name. He knew silence, held with confidence, could enslave minds without lifting a blade. Ask yourself, when you last stayed silent in a conflict, didn't the other person eventually reveal more than you ever planned to ask for? Story example, the duel of words. In medieval Europe, two lords prepared to duel over an insult. One delivered a long, fiery speech, full of rage and pride. The other said nothing. The silence unnerved the crowd and terrified his opponent. By the time swords were drawn, the talkative lord was already defeated in spirit. His enemy's silence had hollowed him out before the battle began. The duel ended quickly. Silence had already won. Do you see it? Silence doesn't just protect you, it attacks them. Your quiet becomes the sword they cannot parry. Machiavelli would teach, use silence as a weapon, but never misuse it. Stay silent when someone tries to provoke you into anger. A rival demands you explain yourself. An enemy seeks to know your plans. A subordinate fears your judgment. But remember, silence must be intentional. Weak silence is submission. Strong silence is domination. When was the last time your silence made someone more uncomfortable than your words ever could? The eighth situation where your mouth betrays you is when silence itself is the greater weapon. Because the moment you break it, you trade power for noise. Silence makes others fear what you might do. Words only reveal what you will do. Machiavelli's warning, let silence speak for you. It whispers louder than screams. We have reached the edge of the map. We've seen silence shield you in insult, rage, rivalry, betrayal, pride, and even in comfort. We've seen silence turned into intimidation, a weapon of dominance. But there is one last, ultimate moment where your own mouth betrays you. A situation so dangerous that even one careless word can undo everything you've built. That final betrayal is where we go next. Situation 9. When facing death or judgment. There is no greater test of the human spirit than when you stand before judgment, whether in a courtroom, in front of your enemies, or in the final moments before death. And in this moment, your mouth becomes your executioner. Because in desperation, men talk too much. They beg. They confess. They reveal their fear. They trade dignity for one last breath. And in doing so, they hand victory to their enemies. Machiavelli would whisper, when the end comes, your silence is your final fortress. Ask yourself, if today were your final day, what would betray you faster? Your enemy's swords, or your own tongue trembling with fear? Why words destroy you at the end? When men face judgment, they believe words can save them. They plead, justify, or explain. But each word corrodes their power. Pleading reveals weakness. Confessing arms your enemies. Explaining admits guilt. But silence? Silence in the face of judgment makes you untouchable. It denies your enemies satisfaction. It leaves your dignity intact, even in defeat. Who dies stronger? The man who begs for mercy, or the man who stares into death with silence on his lips? Historical example, Socrates versus Giordano Bruno. Two men faced judgment centuries apart. Socrates, when condemned in Athens, spoke until the end. His words became legend, yes, but they also revealed his acceptance of death. Giordano Bruno, the heretic philosopher, stood silent as he was burned alive. No plea, no scream, no confession. And to this day, his silence echoes louder than fire. Which man terrifies you more, the one who spoke his defiance, or the one who refused to speak at all?
Think of the most terrifying villains in film or history. Are they the ones who rant endlessly, or the ones who barely speak, who let silence hang like a blade in the air? Machiavelli understood this. A man's last words are remembered, but silence in the face of death becomes myth, because silence cannot be defeated. It leaves others haunted, forever asking, what was he thinking? What did he know that we didn't? Wouldn't you rather be remembered as the man whose silence shook the room than the man whose last words were forgotten within the hour? Modern psychology confirms this. Humans fear the unknown more than the known. Words bring clarity. Silence breeds terror. In the final moment, before punishment, before betrayal, before death, silence is the only way to keep control. Your enemies can kill your body, but silence denies them the victory of killing your spirit. What do you want your last impression to be? Fearful words or silence so heavy it still controls a room after you're gone? Story example, The Prisoner's Choice. There was once a prisoner condemned to execution. His rival begged for mercy, cried, and offered confessions. The executioners laughed at him, but this prisoner said nothing. He walked the blade without a word, without a plea, and when his head fell, the silence left the crowd shaken. One man died humiliated, the other died immortal. Machiavelli would teach, when facing the end, your silence is your crown. If you beg, you feed your enemy's pride. If you argue, you validate their power. But if you remain silent, you take power with you into death. It is the final refusal, the ultimate rebellion, the last strategy that cannot be defeated. If the world demanded your last words, would you give them that satisfaction, or would you let your silence haunt them forever? The ninth and ultimate situation where your mouth betrays you is in the face of judgment and death. Because nothing strips a man faster than begging, confessing, or speaking his fear. But silence at the end turns defeat into victory. Machiavelli's last warning: when all is lost, silence is still yours. Use it, and even in death, you remain untouchable. And so, we return to the truth that began this journey. Your mouth is your greatest betrayer. In insults, in rage, in rivalry, in betrayal, in victory, in comfort, in intimidation, and finally, at the edge of death itself. Every word is a weapon, but one that often wounds the speaker first. Every careless sentence plants a seed of destruction. Every boast, every confession, every plea becomes a dagger turned inward. But silence is eternal. Machiavelli knew this. He lived by it, and his shadow whispers to you now. The man who masters silence is the man who cannot be mastered. So guard your words. Let silence become your shield, your weapon, your power. Speak only when it builds your empire. Remain silent when it protects your throne. Because in the end, history does not remember the chatter of the crowd. It remembers the silence of those who refuse to be broken.